Hello there, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Coon, and you are listening to Gentleman Villain Podcast with
Mm,
Mr. William Regal. How are you doing, Mr. Regal?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Oh, just beautiful. Life is full of infinite possibilities, but one of those is that
Oh,
sometimes you get a
infinite
little too. Oh,
possibilities.
it's true.
So
And so,
pray tell, what are those infinite? I mean, that's a large bit of a scope there, isn't it?
well, I'm just in
I
such a good
mean,
mood for teaching my music camps and getting the kids going, and then on a beautiful
uh,
Sunday, it's beautiful outside. I get to talk to Mr. Regal. It's just a good life.
I'm sorry. I told you I was going to get new music. There's two lads I know in Blackpool that are songwriters, Peter Novak and George Good, and they were putting a new song for this out, and they were going to make it, and it's on their label, and it's Novak and Good. And
Nice.
I'll let you work that one out yourself. Um, so right, there we go. We're off on a good start, just for my entertainment only, anyway.
Well, Mr. Regal, lots of stuff is going on for everybody's entertainment. People are loving the podcast. And one
Are
of the
they?
reasons you want to do the podcast is to document a lot of the things you've gone through in your
Yes.
awesome career. And one of those things, one of those people that people associate with you is one Mr. Dave Fit Finlay.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's someone,
Can I just start this off
sure.
by so I've always wanted to be a wrestler from my earliest memories. And then I say this a lot, but a wrestler, a clown, or a comedian were the three job choices that I wanted in my life, and I got to do all three. I'm you'll never hear me moan about this job. I've had a charm life. Um, so I've gone through it. We've talked about different bits of stuff that it's mad that I didn't see any American wrestling until 2 years after I was already wrestling, or Japanese wrestling, or any wrestling from anywhere, because I grew up watching wrestling on a Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock on ITV, and it's now talked as the world of sport, which actually wasn't that. It was on a show called World of Sport, but it's the wrestling now is it was a part of that show that started at midday and finished at I think it was 5:15 or 5:30 on a Saturday night. Wrestling was on from 4 till just before 5. Then they would give out the soccer results for the day and different things on this show. So it was an institution for 33 years. So I went through different stages of that. And in about 1980, it could be 79, but 80, there was a young man that I'd been used to watching Marty Jones versus Rollerball Rocko, Rollerball Rocko, who were innovators. Well, all of a sudden, I didn't know this at the time, but Mark Rocco was going to uh, Japan as Black Tiger, Tiger Mask's arch nemesis. And so he switched companies. He left Joint Promotions, which was the company that provided the television wrestling in Britain. And all of a sudden, this young 19-year-old Irishman turned up, who quickly became Marty Jones's new rival. And it was Dave Fit Finlay. He had, if you look back, and I'm hoping this is going to open a lot of people's eyes to looking at different times of wrestling. But if you look back, he'd just come out of he'd been wrestling since he was 14. Dave Taylor was on a show with him in England when Dave was 19 and Fit was 14. When I say Dave Finlay's dad, Mr. Finlay, was sending Dave Fit Finlay in his school holidays, over to England to wrestle when he was 14 for a promoter called Orig Williams, who was a wonderful rogue. I loved Orig. He was a Welsh promoter.
I have a question, Mr. Regal,
Yes.
if you don't mind. We've heard these stories about, you just said Mr. Finlay wrestling at 14, heard about Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid, wrestling young age, you wrestling young age.
Yes.
Was it typical to have
Yes.
such young wrestlers, or was it
Well,
something that if you
because
were exceptional?
we were all working class, blue collar, as you Americans call it, um, lads and ladies. And that we've mentioned this before, but it's ridiculous that there's no footage of any ladies because the TV company, Joint Promotions, wouldn't allow any, and wasn't just, it was the TV company
Wow.
wouldn't allow any ladies, and there were a great group of for many years, women's wrestlers in Britain, and never got to be on TV, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it ended the what is considered the world of sport wrestling now. It ended in 1988, and it'd been on for 33 years, and there was not a single woman's match on there, which is ridiculous.
How big of a part were women's matches
On
for
on
the
on Well, there was
except for the
none
TV, outside of TV?
outside of TV. Well, there was what was Joint Promotions was made up of several different companies. It was a bit, if you American history or understand American wrestling, similar to the NWA, that there was different companies all under the banner of Joint Promotions. Mostly it was Dale Martin Promotions because they were based in London. They were the biggest company. But then there was Best Wrighton, which was in the Midlands area. There was Relwisco and Green in the Yorkshire area. There was Norman Beresford had a part of it. By the time I came, sort of started understanding this, there was mostly joint Promotions was made up of Dale Martin Promotions, and Relwisco and Green had still stayed around. Everywhere else had been taken over by Dale Martins. But
So it was pretty much a mirror of the territory system, right? You had these
yes,
territories, but like you said, this association like the NWA under
yes,
one kind of loose umbrella, maybe?
loose umbrella,
Okay.
yes. But so the weekly TV shows, again, and it's a very different type of what American people were used to. It was just matches, because some weeks it would be Dale Martins, some weeks it would be Relwisco and Green, some weeks it would be Best Wrighton, and it was just matches, but a lot of the same wrestlers. Well, not a lot of the same wrestlers. This is something that is hard for people to understand now. The most any one wrestler was on TV in England in 1 year was 6 times. 6 times a year, and that was unusual. Johnny Saint, who is more well known by a lot of American people because in the late 1990s, there's a lot of tape traders started getting some of those British matches, and Johnny Saint was one of the people that they all, that the younger talent took from. The most he was ever on in a year was 4 times. But you were constantly reminded by Kent Walton, the announcer, that if there was 2 other lightweight wrestlers wrestling, Johnny Saint's name was mentioned.
Right.
Jim Breaks was the person who was on the most ever on all the time, all the years of TV, and the most he was on in 1 year was 6 times.
So it's like the wrestling was the attraction.
The
The
wrestling was the
not
attraction. There was
not
no
necessarily the
promos.
stars, right,
There was never a promo. It was just matches. And then you went to your local,
right. So
because
then you made
England
the
is,
most of that TV then, right? You
you
made
made
the
the
absolute
most of that
most of it
TV.
'cause
Yes.
it was like gold, like a chance to kind
Yes.
of get your name out there and
But there
everything
was
like that.
also other promoters. There were what they call opposition promoters. No such thing as indie promoters in those days, or the term, that wasn't a term. There were opposition promoters, and there were some big opposition promoters. Before my time, there was an Australian fella called Paul Lincoln, and then in my time there was Brian Dixon, who ran All Star Promotions, There was Orig Williams, who ran his shows. There was Bobby Barron, who had Worldwide Wrestling Promotions of Blackpool, where I started my career. Um, they all had ladies wrestlers wrestling them, but they weren't on TV. They were just because wrestling was so popular with the mostly with the working classes, and you could go to any town. People didn't travel a lot from where they were from,
Right. The wrestling
and
would have to come to them.
there was lots of, England's the same size as Georgia, and at the time, it's different. I think it's 60 million people live there. Now
Wow.
there was 50 million people. You could There was just shows everywhere. There was constant shows. So just joint promotions ran most shows every 2 weeks or every month. There was a point I think it was in the 60s and early 70s, where just joint promotions, no other opposition promotions, ran 20 shows a month in just the London area because
Wow.
there were smaller buildings that held 2 to 500 people, and there was just so much work, right? And then there was little clubs everywhere that the opposition promoters ran. When Adrian Street, who people might know because he came to America, but he didn't come to America till he was 40. Adrian Street finished working for Joint Promotions on TV in 1973. He ran his own shows then. He was traveling abroad at certain times, but he ran his own shows. He was an opposition promoter and made a fortune because there was so many little clubs and little cabaret places and stuff that you could put a ring in, a 14-foot ring, and run a wrestling show.
He was
And
pretty much the adorable Adrian Street character we came to know in the US in the
yes,
80s.
yeah, yeah,
Same thing.
yeah, and so there was loads of other people that there was wrestling all the time everywhere. But as far as the TV company, they had the monopoly of the TV in fact, for 30, 31 years of the 33. The last 2 years that wrestling was on TV, which finished in 1988, Brian Dixon, who had All-Star Promotions, started to get, he got TV, but not all of it. It was shared. 1 week it would be Joint Promotions, 1 week it would be Brian Dixon Promotions. I believe it was in 1988 they first started showing the occasional WWE show or the WWE match in that time. Also, what happened in 1986, they moved the 4 o'clock show, 4 o'clock time slot to midday. That's how British wrestling came off TV. There was a new person took over ITV called Greg Dyke, who I believe may be in charge of the BBC now. Well, Greg Dyke had different ideas. He thought wrestling was too lowbrow to be on TV. Well, he couldn't just take it off because it was so popular. Now, this is a country of 50 million people, and I was on TV. I was never on the 4 o'clock spot. When I was first on TV, I was on in 1986, and it had been moved to the 12 o'clock spot. Sometimes they moved it around as well, for the following 2 years, and then they took it off. It averaged, I think the average was about 4 million people a week, and there's numbers of certain times when it was up in the eights, and there's a guy called Tony Ershaw that will have all these statistics if you want to know about ratings and stuff. He's on Twitter, but a lot of people watch wrestling. Well, Greg Dyke decided to move. First of all, he stopped the show World of Sport, so then wrestling became its own thing in 1986, and he moved it to midday. Well, it was a working class or blue collar, as you call it, sport. It was cheap to go to. Families went. We've talked about the old grannies and ladies sat on the front row
Right,
eating people
right.
with handbags and stuff. He decided that it was just too lowbrow for what he wanted ITV to be, and he moved it. Most working class people in those days worked half day on a Saturday.
Right.
In the first from now I could have this wrong, but this is what I remember. In the first week that he moved it from 4 o'clock to midday, the viewing figures fell in half because people hadn't got home yet.
Right.
They hadn't settled in for the afternoon. They hadn't done the shopping. They used to finish work, go out and do the shopping
And these are people that already worked Monday through Friday, right?
Monday through Friday,
Right,
but it was a 5.5 day work week for working class people.
right,
So what we get into, you're asking about younger people. Why Dynamite Kid, why Fit Finlay, why myself,
right.
Davey Boy Smith, everybody that was
Started so young.
so young. Why we started that? We were working class people, and working class people, school finished for us at 16, and then you were sent out into the world. There was no chance of, wasn't saying there's no chance, but there was little chance of any further education because you had to go out and bring money into the house. So in
And
my case, it would have been my father and my grandfather were bricklayers and stonemasons. It wasn't no concept of going and doing, um, going to college, and it was like, no, you get a job, you get
right,
a trade
right.
and learn a trade and become a bricklayer, or if you live in an area where it's a steel factory or what whatever the trade is of that certain city or whatever area you came from. If you were working class, that was it. You were finished school at 16 and you had to get a job. Well, if you were like me and had no interest in being in
Right.
my case, a bricklayer,
Sure.
the only thing that could get you out of that was sport. And my chose, and you'll find a lot of soccer players who make, either make it or don't, but they get they leave school at 16. I believe the school leaving age is 18 now, and then you can. There's in the 80s things changed a lot where there's opportunities to go to college and to
Right.
university and
Right.
whatever, but that wasn't a thing until then. It just wasn't. You were deemed like you're working class because there was, especially then, a class system, and you go out and get a job. Well, for us lads who wanted to be wrestlers, or the ladies that wanted to be wrestlers, we left school and we found a way into the wrestling, which wasn't easy in any way, shape, or form, because you had, you know, you there's no easy way into wrestling. There was no such thing as a wrestling school. You were a amateur wrestler, or your dad was a wrestler, or you found a way in some way. Let's put it that way. I was talking to my friend Mal Sanders yesterday, superstar Mal Sanders, who was famous British wrestler in the 70s and 80s. He was an amateur wrestler. He lived in London. Dale Martins had a gym there. He got basically brought in there and got dragged about, and they tried to run him off because even though he was an amateur wrestler, but he stayed the course, and he became uh, um, he was another teenage wrestler that and then continued with a career. So I think I've answered all those questions.
Absolutely.
Greg Dyke, by the way, has admitted later on, probably wasn't the smartest thing because we're still getting ridiculously good ratings. People would kill for the ratings that we were getting even at 12 o'clock
But
nowadays.
I'm sure you know that in the US, we had the exact same thing going on. We had
Okay.
these executives who and advertising people that say wrestling's too lowbrow. We're trying to move it around to different places.
Yep.
We have new people in charge who don't necessarily understand the business. Like all this stuff, these universal themes. And real quick, another universal theme that everybody has, Mr. Regal, is having a car and having car trouble. And this
Mhm.
episode is brought to you by Carshield, who makes it easy and affordable to protect my car from expensive repairs. And that's just for starters. Carshield is the number one auto protection company in the US and offers protection plans for around $100 a month. That's much more than you were making when you first started. Well, that's about right. $100 a month when you first started wrestling.
And a bit more than $100 a month, but certainly not $100 a week, let's put it that way.
The plans cover more than
No.
more parts than ever before, whether your car is 5,000 miles or 150,000 miles. Let me tell you how simple it is to get your car fixed. When you need a repair, you choose the mechanic, and CarShield's administrators handle the rest. That's it. You don't have to deal with the paperwork or headaches. You're taken care of. Same goes if your car breaks down and you're stuck on the side of the road. Plans through CarShield also include coast-to-coast roadside assistance. CarShield administrators are there for you with rental car options and trip reimbursements at no extra cost too. Get coverage today and you'll lock in your price now and it will never go up. That means as long as you own your car, no matter how old it is, you're protected from the rising costs of parts and repairs for your vehicle. CarShield helps protect my wallet from expensive car repairs, and they'll do the same for you. Go to carshield.com/podcast to start your plan and lock in your pricing forever. That's carshield.com/podcast. A deductible may apply. Now, Mr. Regal, of course,
Right.
anybody who's listening to our shows, your show, knows
Our
that
show.
yeah, it's
Uh,
it's the Mr. Regal show, and it can go in several directions.
yes.
We try to keep it on
Keep it on
you
track.
know,
So
we
let's
try.
go back to
But I do want
Fit
to say
Finlay.
that what we just heard, man, at least for me, someone who doesn't know anything about it, is a unprecedented kind of history of British wrestling on TV, the British wrestling territory system, and I think it's fascinating stuff. And as a young wrestler, are you privy to all these different things, to all these different territories, or are you just trying to become a wrestler?
You knew, I obviously, I watch TV every week from my earliest memories. 3, 4, I was watching wrestling every Saturday afternoon.
Right.
My I lived out in a little village. Uh, my dad built a house because he was a bricklayer. He built a house 50 yards from the house that he was built in, where my grandparents lived. Okay. And they had a little tiny house and they raised one girl and 4 boys there in 2 tiny bedrooms and a little tiny kitchen. And so by the time I came along, uh, I spent a lot of time with my granddad because my dad was always at work because he owned his own company and he had to work all hours and was out getting work and just I loved my granddad, who was an old rogue. So I could just toddle up the road 50 yards and I'd be with my granddad, and my granddad watched the wrestling. And my granddad used to do a little bit of wrestling in the 1920s and a bit of boxing and a bit of running and whatever else for money. And he was a bit of a rogue as well. I've been told I'm a bit like him. Um, if you ever get to see it, I think the few people that own a copy of my book, I'm not trying to sell it because you can only get it in Kindle form now, but there is a picture of my granddad in a suit and you can definitely see the resemblance.
You
And
do
I grew
favor him, sir. You do favor him.
yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up with everybody telling me I was very much like my granddad, because he was he was an handful when he when he was younger. So I was always watching wrestling. Okay, so there's different times, and we've talked about, and if not, we'll talk about it another time of different wrestlers that I liked. But then 1978. Not that I hadn't seen them, because every 2 weeks my dad was also great and took me to the local wrestling show, which was a joint promotion show, which it was actually Best Writing. And so all the TV stars of the day I was seeing every 2 weeks from September through May. I think I've said this on this podcast, but the way that wrestling ran, because in those days, the whole coast of Britain, it was just little seaside towns, little vacation resorts. And so from September, it was either most regular shows in big towns or cities were every 2 weeks or every month. So, and then the reason they stopped in the end of May, it was because then people were going on vacation. So they
Okay.
started that the shows they'd take the summer. There was still wrestling going on, but it was just on the coastal areas, because
In the
people
towns where people are vacationing.
where they're vacationing,
Right.
yeah. Um,
On holiday.
on holiday, yeah. So, but except for the summer months, I was going to wrestling every 2 weeks, and I was seeing characters and whatever. Well, I'd seen them wrestle loads of times, but nothing clicked with me until characters clicked with me and certain wrestlers. But then in 1978, I saw Rocko wrestle Marty Jones, which I've talked about before, and my 10-year-old brain just exploded, and it was like nothing I'd seen. And
First time you saw, that's it.
no, I'd seen him wrestle before, but it hadn't had the effect on me that it did at 10. Because I was, there's probably a lot of long-time wrestling fans listening here. When you're younger, it's characters and things that attract you, or different. But then
100%, yeah.
10 years old, I'm sat with my granddad, and I see this match that they had, that if you haven't seen it, go and watch it on YouTube now. It's from 1978, and it's Rollerball Rocko versus Marty Jones, and Marty is wearing red tights, and he's got a perm for some reason. Watch that match if you don't know anything about British wrestling, and understand that there was nothing like it ever until they were doing it, but this was the first time that it really sunk in, or you can actually see it. There's some matches I've found of them two from 1976 where this style is evolving, this what became the junior heavyweight cruiserweight style. But this is the one that you can watch where you're going, okay, this is where it all changed.
And as a kid, it appealed to you like a sport, right? Like it wasn't characters. It appealed to you like it was a who's going to win, who's going to lose, who's better.
It all did. Wrestling always did that, because I wasn't, I like wrestling.
Right.
But this actual match, these two were going at it so hard, and so just that the wrestling was, whatever it was, my brain tuned into that.
Yeah.
Because before that, I watched all kinds of wrestling, and I enjoyed it a lot, especially character villains and different stuff, different people. But I was more into character villains, and it's not the cool thing to say, but at 7 years old, Big Daddy was my hero.
Right.
Who was, and because he was a superhero.
He was bigger than life.
To us, bigger than life.
Right.
By 10, he wasn't these two were. Right. So they had their thing going on, and all of a sudden, Tiger Mask, before he was Tiger Mask, came over. Dynamite was 16 at the time when they started doing their thing. He had his incredible traditional British style, but he had like Dynamite. He was, even at 16, if you watch Dynamite Kid, he was just sensational. But then you've got two fellas that are in the mid-20s doing this incredible stuff. So he's trying to keep up with them. And then he goes to Calgary and takes his British style and the stuff that he's watched them do, and it all spread from there. Sammy Lee, who was Tiger Mask, came over, and in 79, and he had to keep up with those two as well. He'd brought his Japanese, and he'd just come from Mexico. So that's the origins of that, because then Sammy Lee went back to Japan as Tiger Mask. He brought over Mark Rocko, as Black Tiger. Dynamite was mostly in Calgary, brought him over because he by then he was what 20 or whatever, and not the 16-year-old that I remember seeing when I first saw him, because I saw him live when I was a child. He was incredibly skillful, but he wasn't the person when he was 20. He was a different person, you know. He was just he started getting big, and he was just in a he'd found his style and just kept innovating things. So Mark Rocko stuck out the picture. Well, then the next thing, although he'd been wrestling, I'd never seen him on shows whenever he wasn't either at school or in the army, because there was a time when Fit Finlay when he was 16, was living in England once he left school and wrestling on opposition shows. He'd gone back to Ireland and gone in the army for 2 years. Now, I didn't know any of his history. I just know that Rocko sort of disappeared in 1980. What it was, he'd moved to work for Brian Dixon, and he was working in Japan a lot. And all of a sudden, Marty Jones, his new rival, is a young Fit Finlay who's 19 and is incredible. I'm going to mention a match here that's well worth everybody's time. At the same time, Davey Boy Smith was a young wrestler. He's older than me, but again, started as a teenager.
And I think what we're going to
young
do,
David.
I think we're going to make a list of all the matches you
Okay.
mentioned, and we're going to put it in the
Put it on-
podcast description.
Great.
So
Great.
anybody who wants to look these up, including myself, we're going to look them up. So please feel free, Mr. Regal, just to yell out these matches whenever you feel,
Right.
because we'll put them on the list and people watch them. And please continue. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So the Davey Boy Smith had gone over to Calgary, and he whenever he was back in England, and same with Dynamite, whenever they came back to England, they'd do a few shows, and they'd always put them on TV because they were, you know, now it's the young English lads that have done well for themselves, but they were, you know, you can see this, they've gone from being 16-year-olds to being 20 or a bit, you know,
Men.
a bit either side, and men and muscles and just incredible, right? So there's a great match of a young Fit Finlay, and he's got a shaved, like a crew cut hairstyle, and he's wrestling Davey Boy Smith. And there was a lot of wrestling, was all kinds of things in Britain. There was a lot of just competitive matches, and they would have had orders to go out and not have what is traditionally an American kind of a style of a villain and a baby face. They would have just been told to go out and have a competitive wrestling match, and that would have been orders from the promoter, and it would be go out and have a really good competitive match.
Did the fans organically choose like someone they liked, someone they disliked? Is that? But the promoters didn't lean in. You didn't lean into that character-wise. You just did what you did.
You did at times, but then there was other times. You heard me say about the strength of the job. Sometimes they just, whether it be, there was a lot of credible heavyweights or credible any weight class wrestlers. The promoter, depending on who was on either side, because in their hour that they had on TV, they might say to, even Fit Finlay was a natural villain, but they might have said to him, "You've just come over here to work for us. Just go out and have a credible wrestling match with Davey Boy to keep the strength of the job." And what they meant by that was just to show people that how good this is.
Right.
But no shenanigans, no villainy, just a credible wrestling match, which there's a lot more of as time went on. You know that it doesn't, especially the more cruiserweight styles. It's more of, there's not in the last 20 years, there's not so much baby faces villains.
Right.
If you outside of WWE or, you know, like when I was in NXT, there was, you maybe on the side of being a villain, but the wrestling style is more
Front and
competitive.
center. Right.
It's not so much turning behind the referee's back and making
Right.
people boo you.
In this time, you
Right.
got, Mark Rollerball Rocko. You got a young Fit Finlay, Marty Jones. You're
Yeah.
talking Dynamite, Davey
And
Boy
Davey
Smith.
Boy.
Is this the golden age
And then
of British wrestling?
No, there was never not a golden age of British wrestling until I came along, and then that was the
Then it
end
was
of that.
over.
Then
And
it was over.
nail it in, yeah.
Yeah. I put a stop to that because I was terrible for this. So I ended that really quickly, because I wasn't. That's the thing. The people of the usual youngsters that were around, not all of them, there was plenty that fell by the wayside, but the ones that stayed about, and me being one of them, I was the worst of them, all of them, when I was a teenager. I just persevered, and then I ended up growing to being 6'3" and being the size that I am. And so I wanted to be more of a junior heavyweight, cruiserweight.
But your body had
Stylish,
different
but
your body had different ideas.
different ideas.
It decided, no,
So
that's not what you're gonna be, sir.
there was, like, these fellas would just go and go and Fit Finlay. You watch this match anyway with Davey Boy and Fit Finlay, and it's just incredible. But there's no real villain in it. It's just a wow.
What were
This
Fit
is
Finlay's hallmarks as a young wrestler? Like, when you
just
saw him wrestle, like, what
well.
what
The
was it?
first time I saw him wrestle on TV, I'm just like, he's in a different league to everybody else, and I still think that. He was just so good, and so his movement quality. And then we've talked about wrestling like Terry Rudge told me that wrestlers should wrestle, good wrestlers wrestle like a big cat. He was so much like a tiger that it's just brilliant at what he did. So that was around this time, which would have been around 1980. Again, this is 3 years before I've even stepped. I'm a fan. What will I be, 12 then? I'm 12. I'm watching Dave Fit Finlay. Then I watch Dave Fit Finlay start to come into his own. So not only is he's on a lot, he's on TV. Again, not that much, but I'm also seeing him every 2 weeks at my local. Also,
So you're seeing him live as well as
as well. So I'm seeing him a lot. But the way they structured it, it seemed like he was on a lot at the time, and he was 6 times a year is actually, it time goes by so quick. Or if he was on whatever amount of time, he wasn't on that much. But he'd be on at least once, every 2 months.
With the announcers, you mentioned earlier that whenever there were two cruiserweights talking or wrestling, they would talk about Johnny Saint. Would
two lightweights wrestling,
right?
Because Johnny Saint was the lightweight world champion. Then there was the middleweights. Then there was the heavy middleweights, and then there was the light heavyweights, and then the heavyweights. So whenever they were talking, whoever was wrestling of that weight class, they'd be mentioning other names.
That's what I was getting at. Would they be in the minds of the
whether you knew it or not, you were getting.
I'd love to see him take on so and so one day.
Yes,
like
yes.
that. Okay.
And if the winner of this will have a chance to fight Johnny Saint, or the winner of this match between Dave Fit Finlay and Davey Boy Smith will get a chance to wrestle Marty Jones.
And those divisions you mentioned, were they strict like boxing divisions where there was no crossover? Very little crossover between.
There was crossover, and it was called a catchweight match.
Oh yeah, okay.
When you would have people from different weight classes wrestle each other.
Was that a special feature? Was that something that people
would be? It wasn't a special feature. It was just, it was put on. And then you'll find, if you ever listen, that constantly Kent Walton was talking about, wow, this man's giving away. We weigh ourselves in stones in England, which is
Right.
1 stone is 14 pounds. This man's giving away 1.5 stones. This man's giving away 2 stone, making it like, wow, this is a big deal. If because boxers box each other of the same weight, and
Right.
it was considered in that like a sport,
In that
right?
paradigm where the smaller guy just by default would be the underdog.
Yes. So Fit Finlay came along. The next thing that he's just every time you see him, he's just incredible. Then he started tagging with an incredible heavyweight wrestler called Skull Murphy. Now there's an American wrestler called Skull Murphy. There's a British wrestler called Skull Murphy. Skull Murphy used to wrestle. British Skull Murphy used to wrestle as Bad Boy Steve Young. His father, Rollerball Davis, was a very famous wrestler in his time in the 60s. And Skull Murphy ended up shaving his head. And he looked at Max Crabtree, the promoter, named him Skull Murphy because as Steve Young, he used to wrestle for the opposition promoters. When I say opposition promoters, they were full-time promoters as well. They just didn't have TV. There was so much wrestling in England, it was ridiculous.
Were those opposition promoters also under that same loose NWA like
No,
umbrella? So
not at all.
it's what we call, like, especially in the 80s, Memphis had, Jarrett and Lawler, but they also had this outlaw promotion with Randy
Right.
Savage that wasn't part of it,
Yes.
and it would get contentious. Like there would be physical situations among
Yes.
those promotions.
And there was a lot of that went on. It was a big deal to work for joint promotions, but there were, I quit. This is my story. I finally got to work for joint promotions when I was 18, which was the TV company. But at the same time, that was when Brian Dixon started getting every other week. But Brian Dixon had better wrestlers, and I had been getting retrained by Marty Jones, who was like completely retrained me when I was 17 because I've been wrestling for a smaller company. And I got put as Big Daddy's tag partner, and I knew I wasn't all this wrestling that I was learning, this technical wrestling and
You're
all
not
this
gonna need it.
thing. I'm just getting beaten up to make the tag. So I quit joint promotions after 3 months and went to work for Brian Dixon, not thinking I would get on TV because he had his own crew. I just wanted to not only wrestle better wrestlers, but be around better wrestlers. Because joint promotions at the time their business was going down. Right. In the last few years, there's a lot of reasons why British wrestling got took off TV. Greg Dyke being number one. The other thing is joint promotions didn't really promote. They were excellent at a stage. Max Crabtree was excellent, but he stopped building young stars, and he's the probably last. Danny Collins and people were his last really big stars in the early 80s, and then they went their own way. Everybody once Brian Dixon got 1 week of TV, and it was joint promotions 1 week of TV. The top people, some of the people, and me being one of them, you either work for one or the other.
Right.
But some of the better known names, it was whoever offered you the most money.
Right.
And then joint promotions had no choice. They had no hold over you. If you had a night off and Brian Dixon would give you a job, you could work for them.
Okay.
My first ever TV, I wrestled Marty Jones, and Jim Breaks was on it against Kung Fu, Eddie Hamill, who was somebody who had helped train Fit Finlay as well. Fit Finlay's dad and Eddie Hamill, Kung Fu, had sort of created in Ireland, they'd sort of created wrestling, and there was a couple of other people as well, but those two were the one, and they were so much better than everybody else. It was unbelievable, and they sort of created their own world, and then Fit Finlay became part of that, and then Rocky Moran, and there was a lad called Stewart. He wrestled as Tony Stewart. He got trained by Fit Finlay's dad, and they were all excellent, right? Let me just finish this. That all the people of when I started, all the ones that stuck around were all better than me, right? They were just all really good. Danny Collins and Richie Brooks and this Robbie Brookside and all. They were all just better than me, better athletes than me, whatever. So I persevered once I got my foot in the door. Anyway, so Fit Finlay's, all of a sudden, he's the man. And he's wrestling either in tag teams with Skull Murphy, who was an excellent heavyweight wrestler and taught me a lot, because once I got to a certain height, a certain size, I wrestled him a lot, and he was brilliant. But they'd tag together. You can watch matches of Fit Finlay and Skull Murphy tagging. They were a great tag team. But then all of a sudden, Fit Finlay and Marty Jones became rivals. And that was sort of the thing for the next few years. Let's get into 1986. At the end of it, I've just left Joint Promotions. I've gone to work for Brian Dixon. The following February of 87, I'm sorry if I'm saying 90, this is all in the 80s, 86, in November, I left Joint Promotions. I went to work for All-Star Promotion. Well, I was working for mostly All-Star Promotions, but I was also still working, which I never stopped working for Worldwide Wrestling Promotions of Blackpool. When I went to work for Joint Promotions, they said to me, "Oh, you can't work there anymore." I just did anyway.
Right.
Because I was very loyal to Bobby Barron, because he gave me my break.
So you're still...
I'm still working full-time.
You're not exclusive at all.
No, but I'm supposed to be. They tried to keep a hold over you.
Right.
But I was so insignificant. They're not going to see me on a show in a little show in Blackpool. They got nobody. It's
right.
But that's for another time.
I mean, it was
trying to
people
get back
forget
to
it was a
Fit
different
Finlay.
time, because
Yeah.
they wouldn't read about it on the internet, or no one would call you on a cell phone.
No.
You could wrestle that match and no one would ever know, except people in
Yeah.
the building,
If you were Fit Finlay, you couldn't. Somebody's going to spot. You're not going to
Right.
spot Joe Bloggs here, because I had a different name every time I wrestled until I was 18. That's why. That's
Right.
why I ended up with the name Steve Regal.
Right.
I was about to debut for Joint Promotions in I think was it June 1986, and I'd had a different name every day for the last 2 years. Whatever I was just part of the show. I worked all the time, which is an incredible thing that I had that a lot of people don't get anymore, which is such a sad for the younger wrestlers, that they don't get the amount of reps that I used to get when I was younger.
Right.
And so
Sure.
it was just rep after rep. But I had a different name. Whatever they decided to put down on these, that was me. I was all kinds of names, right? But I was going to work for Joint Promotions, and I happened to have I knew a wrestler called Tony Francis, and anytime that I was wrestling nearby Blackpool, or I had a day off, he had a shop that sold secondhand furniture and cookers and anything really to make money. And he'd sell a bit of anything and a few things through the back door as well if he had to. He was another lovely rogue and a wonderful man to me. He was always lovely. Me and him happened to have we sat in his shop, and we had an American Wrestling magazine. There was a picture of Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal, and he went, "That's a good name." And so I went, "Okay, well, I didn't think I was going to come to America, or never, I'm 18. That's how I ended up with the name Steve Regal."
Hey, let me ask you this. Mr. Electricity, AWA Steve Regal.
Yes.
I believe he follows me on Twitter. He's still around. Have you had conversations with him at all about?
No. And the only connection that we've had,
Uh-huh.
when I first came over here, he's very good friends with Larry Zabisco. They used to be roommates
Sure. They were both AWA
in the
together.
AWA.
Yeah. Mhm.
And Larry, this was in 1994, had been on the phone with Steve Regal and asked, because it's an unusual name, Regal. And he asked Larry to ask me if if he knew if we were related in any way. And so I had to tell Larry this story. No, I pinched your name when I was 18 and it stuck.
Right.
You know, it just stuck until I came here and then it just stayed that way. And after a while, became Lord Steve. And so, you know, in a short period of time, so it was Stephen Regal but that was how I got my name. Anyway.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Mr. Regal, because we're going to talk about, it is, I don't know what it's like where you're at, but where I'm at, it's kind of hot. It's summertime and
yes.
and it's time to bring that summer heat into the bedroom.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Here
Guys,
we go.
confidence can take you far in life. It can also help in the bedroom, especially when it comes time to step up to the plate. That's where Bluechew comes in. Bluechew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready when an opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting at the pharmacy. Blue, that sounds good, doesn't it, Mr. Regal? Sounds pretty good.
It sounds good, but I mean, I can get away with a little bit of blue on this.
Oh, absolutely,
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Well, so by the bedside, I got them mixed up the other night.
Oh no.
I got the Bluechew mixed up with the sleeping pills, and instead of getting 40 winks, I had 40 masturbation. Anyway, that's enough of that. So let's carry on.
Well, a man's got to do it. A man's got to get some sleep, Mr. Regal. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to get to bed. And the Bluechew tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. You know, as we said, Bluechew is the thing that's going to get you off the couch and back to work. And if your tool needs an
Pole
upgrade,
vault off the couch in some cases.
yeah, you might not even need someone to help lift you off in that case. They can just grab a handle and with the Bluechew. And of course, as you know, as I'm sure you know, Mr. Regal last a couple weeks ago was very, you know, demure in his obvious big giant female fan base, and women who love Mr. Regal say there's
If they
nothing.
only knew, they'd be so disappointed, because my wife tells me I make love like one of them old VCR machines. It's fast forward, pause, and eject. It's like,
Well, they're still going to love that confidence, and Bluechew can help give you confidence where it counts. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, Bluechew can help. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Bluechew free when you use our promo code Gentleman at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com, promo code Gentleman, to receive your first month free. Don't be a villain in the bedroom. Be a gentleman. Visit bluechew.com. I mean, unless that's what they're into, for more details and important safety information. And we thank Bluechew for sponsoring the podcast. Now, Mr.
Thank you.
Regal,
Yes.
you said at some point, Mr. Fit Finlay became the man.
Okay.
Became the man.
It became the man, and you can watch the progression if you watch matches of him. You'll see him with short hair, and then you see him start. He was married to a lovely lady called Paula Valdez, who was a wonderful women's wrestler from Manchester. She became then made Paula, who was one of the few ladies that got on TV in Britain, his manager as Princess Paula. And all of a sudden he changed the look that he had with the short hair. He started growing his hair, and he started wearing green and white tights and trunks with shamrocks on. And I think we've talked about this, that all of a sudden Fit Finlay knew how to he could cause a riot in a phone box. He was so good at getting true heat. And when I say heat, I mean people wanted to all the fans wanting to attack him.
But it wasn't wait for the ref's back to be turned kind of heat, right?
It
Was it just
was
his character,
it
just
was
the way it
just
addressed the audience?
everything. It was turning away from the
Okay.
referee. It was everything he did. He knew exactly how to make people hate him. He was an expert villain, right? Now, all of a sudden, not only is an expert villain who can, I want to get this before I forget this. So there was a time once he grew his hair and he started wearing the green stuff and he had a green cape and he had this big cavalier hat with a big green feather on it. And he had the longest name in wrestling. So we'll go back to the other stuff, how he got there, but he had the longest name in wrestling. And they used to introduce him as, from Belfast, the Belfast Bruiser, Superman, Dave Fit Finlay. That was it. That was how they introduced him. The Belfast Bruiser, Superman, Dave Fit Finlay.
I gotta be honest, with that name and you describing his hat, I hate him already. Like, I
Right.
really I can't stand him.
And he used to stand there, and Paula was a heat-getting machine as well. She 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 would just
That's his
rile
wife, right?
crowds up. Yes, his wife, his ex-wife. Um, and unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She was always lovely to me. But she was a great wrestler, and she knew how to just manipulate crowds. And so you've got her, Paula, doing her thing and knowing exactly how to do it because she's been around wrestling since she started as a teenager. Um, and wrestled full time for all these opposition promoters. And now she's with Dave, and Dave's all of a sudden gone from what he started as. I mentioned the Davey Boy Smith match. You'll see the way he used to, the stuff that he wore. Sometimes he wore just regular trunks. Sometimes he wore tights, but he had a short haircut. Now he's wearing these green tights and trunks, and shamrocks on them. And we've talked about this in a time when
It's a
Ireland and
it's
the
a political
IRA,
statement,
a
you're right.
political thing, the IRA were at war with Britain
But, like, not a political statement like today, like a political statement with, like, blood and
with
guns and
and
war.
guns and bombs going off
Just
regularly in both countries.
so when he's coming in with that, that is a statement. I like it, and you guys aren't exactly oceans and oceans apart. Like, this is a very real thing for a lot of people
This is
watching,
a
right?
very, very real thing because you are fed. Again, I've said this before. Nothing to do with normal people from either country. It's a government
Right,
thing.
right.
Okay.
As it usually is.
Right. Um, so, but you are fed, the working classes of Britain are fed whatever they're fed by the media. And so there's this ridiculous, there's no other word for it, but racism and hatred going on between the English and the Irish for no reason, but it just stirred up by the media, and it's a government problem, and certainly not working class people. It's got nothing to do with them, but there's this
Everybody's swept up in it.
swept up in it. And
Mhm.
I, thankfully, in my house, my dad worked with a lot of Irish people, and it was just, oh, it was worked with a lot of people from a lot of all over the world, different parts of the world. Once people started coming to England in the after World War II, because they were in construction, so they learned that everybody's the same.
Sure, for sure.
But that's not everybody, and the British and Irish thing, I think, still goes on to this day.
Mhm.
Some of this stuff, I mean, and me and Fit Finlay played off it when we came to America. I mean,
You
it was that we didn't, we were just doing our thing, but
I
it was
say
mentioned on commentary that, about the British and the Irish having problems. It was a thing. So all of a sudden I'm still watching wrestling. I'm not actually inside the wrestling game yet. And Fit Finlay
Of course.
is the he's
He's wearing the
this guy.
Irish gear.
Yes, he's
He's
wearing the Irish gear, and I've
right.
talked about this, but he was, going out and getting spit on in the street, and Paula getting spit on at the supermarket, and this is serious, serious stuff. And he
And I say this about the IRA and the war to our American listeners to who might understand this is if we think of an equivalent in our American wrestling, it might be the Iron Sheik during the hostage crisis,
right,
but this is about 10 times more intense and a 10 times
yes,
more widespread and it hit home because people had family members who were involved in this thing. And
and get and then you'd hear the news had come on, and if you're Irish, there's such and such happened in Ireland. If you're British, there's bombs gone off and places getting blown up in England, and it's a serious issue, right? Thankfully, that that and I've got my stories of times when I was in Ireland in the late 80s, and very scary, and I wasn't scared much,
by much,
but
yeah.
but I've seen some scary things there,
And
right?
Fit
Fit
just
played that up to the
playing
hilt.
into it is really, but it takes a lot of balls and also
Takes a lot of
absolutely,
courage, and he
right.
wasn't frightened that he wouldn't back down to anybody. So you got Fit, whoever he's on with, he is the villain. He is the absolute top villain in Britain
I
and
assume usually
the
someone
best
British.
wrestler.
He's usually wrestling someone from
It
England.
didn't matter. It
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
matter. They
yeah,
just
okay. Right.
he just ate him. But he was so good. I mean, he was just brilliant. He was whatever. So I'm going to backtrack a bit here. In 1985, I got introduced to Marty Jones by Tony Francis, who I just mentioned, who decided on the name of Steve Regal for me. And they Fit and Tony were friends, and I was wrestling already for this smaller company in Blackpool. I went to a joint promotion show with Tony Francis. I was just stood at the back, and he introduced me to Marty Jones. And Marty said, "Okay, you come and train with me on a Sunday morning." He had a ring in a stable, in a horse stable in just outside of Manchester. And there was only two people in that 18 months that I was going there every Sunday. I was a full-time wrestler, and I'm going over there on a Sunday and working in a nightclub as well on a Friday and Saturday night in Blackpool. But I would get over there 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning and never charge me a penny or ask me for anything. The only thing he asked me for was hard work. Myself and the only two people that survived that, or because he would invite other people, were myself and another incredible, far better than me, wrestler called Mark McCoy, who after a while stopped wrestling. And me and him trained together, and he was just always better than me. So I hadn't met Fit Finlay at this time because I was training with Marty, but I was still on working smaller opposition shows. I turn up on a Sunday morning, and there's more than the usual two cars sometimes there might be three if there was somebody new who'd been invited. They didn't usually last long because Marty would put you through it. Not taking liberties,
Right.
taught you the right way. But it was the squats, push-ups, all and then get in the ring and teaching you everything properly. Well,
But you saw those cars in the parking lot, you knew something was up.
I knew there was more people going to be there than me and Kid McCoy anyway, because at the time there was just me and Kid McCoy. Nobody else was around. There'd been a few lads, and they'd stopped coming because for whatever reason they couldn't handle it or whatever. And I walk in and I see Max Crabtree, who is the head promoter of the joint promotions, Dale Martin Promotions, who is Big Daddy's brother, by the way. Now, my whole thing was Marty's telling me, you train with me enough, you can work for Joint Promotions, which is a big step up the ladder for me. So I'm there, and I see these two other fellas. Now, these two other fellas were huge men, but in different ways. One of them was a huge man that looked like Mario, the video game character. And the other fella was a giant, but the scruffiest looking giant you've ever seen, covered in homemade tattoos, right? He's got the love and hat. Actually, he had love and hat on one hand because somebody had bit his finger off. Well, so, and I'm joking. It's an old joke. But he had all the prison tattoos and all that stuff. Now, at the time, the Big Daddy Roadshow kind of thing was coming.
It was winding down.
It was white. It had peaked in the very early 80s. And unfortunately, that was one of the reasons on promotions, because it kept going long after its sell-by date. Max Crabtree was an excellent promoter, and he still was when but it's a family thing, right? And he didn't build up anymore. Fit became a star. He'd have become a star. It didn't matter what. But he kept the Big Daddy thing going as much as possible. Well, you needed opponents for Big Daddy, and Big Daddy was a super heavyweight, and you wanted you wanted monsters, is what you wanted. And it's not the nicest of term, but they used to, the older fellas used to call any of these people that they found to wrestle Daddy that didn't stay in the game, but were just there to have maybe one TV match with him, two big monsters in a tag match with a young babyface. And I'd say it was me, because it was me, okay? But I never had to work or wrestle with any of these not good wrestlers. The ones that I did, they were big fellas, Drew McDonald and Rex Strong and people, but they knew what they were doing. He was always on the lookout for another pair, some new monsters to fight Daddy. That was part of the attraction of it. And the older wrestlers used to call him Daddy Fodder. So they were just basically so I don't know if this is true or not, because this is Marty telling me after this what I'm going to tell you now happened, and then they left. And once they'd left, me, Marty, and Kid McCoy did our usual training, and he told us Max was basically driving along the street, looked over at a bus stop, and saw these two fellas stood there, pulled his car over. Oh, have you ever thought about being wrestlers? That was how they ended up there. Well, there was still no easy way in. You had to go and get put through it.
Sure.
Right? That was it. This was in a day and age where we told people this was
protected the business.
level, protected the business.
Right.
So even though they were whatever they may be, they still had to go through the ring. So they're there, and that me and Kid McCoy are sort of there. We're both in early, I'm 17. Kid McCoy might be a year older than me, or about the same age anyway. Max Crabtree's there. Well, we just go in. Marty went, go and introduce yourself. So we go on along with Mr. Crabtree, and he's like, hello, kid, how are you? Max talk like that. Hello, kid, how you doing? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Marty says good things about you. Probably never talked to Marty about us. It's just Max. He was just the way he was, right? You could always tell. I really like Max. He was, and when later on in my career, he was very good to me. He used to actually sit down and explain everything and why you shouldn't. But I hadn't even worked for. He didn't even know me at this time. But he just you could tell when Max was lying. He used to always have an handkerchief, and then he'd pull it out and he'd start rubbing his mouth. So you used to have these giveaway signs. And again, a wonderful, I liked him, but all the promoters I knew, they were all rogues. I think that's part and parcel of being a promoter. But I liked him. I didn't know him at this time, but I got on very well with him later on. He was always nice to me. I would love, I know he's still alive, but one day when I get back to him, I'd love to go and see him because he was very good to me later on. So Max Crabtree's there, and next thing, we hear another car pull up, and Fit Finlay walks in. Now, me and Kid McCoy, these fellas are just stood in the corner, and Marty's like telling them to do stuff, you know, like exercises, but they can't do any of them because they're not fit. They're not. They're just big fellas, like. But he's making them do. But he's told us to do what we normally do. We're about 25 feet away from them. We're doing our squats and our push-ups and our bridges and whatever else we used to do. We're just doing it on a mat in the corner. Marty's sort of with them. Max Crabtree's there with a clipboard and a pencil, as if he's taking notes. I don't think he took a note. Might have been drawing a picture, anything. Who knows? I don't know. It's just trying to look important.
It just looks good when you have a clipboard. It just looks good. Right. Yeah.
Fit Finlay walks in. Now, the usual thing was after we finished our training, we'd get in the ring. So I'd climb in the ring, waiting for Kid McCoy. The next thing, Fit Finlay opts in. And I'm in this job now, but I've only watched him wrestle. And if you watch him wrestle, there's no not thinking that this fella knows what he looks like he hurts people. That's from somebody who's already in the wrestling job. And he can. He's the real deal. So I'm thinking, well, he's going to drag me about, but it's going to be a good lesson, because I'd been getting dragged about for the last 2 years I was in the job anyway. But this is I'm looking at this as an honor. He's going to just drag me and beat me up and smash me about and do whatever. I don't care. It's Fit Finlay, and I'm going to learn something from this, right? And I'm there, and he gets in, and all this stuff's going through my brain, right? Well, he's going to give me a good hiding, but that's okay. And he went, not you, them. That was all he said. So I went, oh. So I climb out, and I'm just stood like Japanese young boy style on the side of the ring. Marty went, right, you, points at the one that looked like Mario. You get in the ring. He gets in the ring, and the next 5 minutes, this fella is brutalized, and not like just liberty. I mean, he didn't. There's some people have made reputations from, okay, you get on your hands and knees, and then I'll do that. You know, then you can put submissions on them or whatever, or give me, put your head in this kind of thing, or let me show you this. And help you. Fit didn't do that. Fit just went right
to it,
straight to it. So this fella's got he's only seen wrestling or whatever. He's come before he knows what's happening. He's on his head. He's just tortured him. I'm not exaggerating on both of these. They were crying, and there was blood coming out of every hole that they had. He has battered the life out of this fella.
You paint a picture, sir.
And he's ended up, this fella's just like, no more, and rolled out and fell on the floor. And he's a big, heavy fella, and he's just, I thought he was going to have a stroke or something. Like, me and Kid McCoy are like, oh
no.
Now he's gone. Marty went, you get in to the big fella. How
slow did he get in the ring?
He was a little trepidatious, let's put it that way. The big fella had no teeth at the front at all. His teeth were out. He takes his shirt off. So you could see his T-shirt off. He's already covered in sweat. He's done whatever, about a 20th of what me and Kid McCoy have done as far as exercise-wise. He's already done, right? He's done like 3 squats and half a push up, but he's 6'6" and maybe 300 and odd pound. He took his t-shirt off that's already drenched in sweat. He has got F the police tattooed across his chest.
Oh, wow.
Right? This
Right.
is what kind of person this is. Right? Same thing again. Fitz just attacked this fella. This fella's trying to fight him off. It's got no chance. Fitz has just dragged him down. He's smashed, I mean, just all over him, just like tearing, just
I envision it as a mix of aggression and skill, just
and
completely.
skill, aggression, and just shit. There's no, I think they're all the fit, but he can be a very once he goes off, there's no messing. He's a spiteful fighter.
And his dad
Right.
was like that too, right?
Right. Mr. Finlay is that they can go right.
Right.
So he's got this fella. He's got him in every submission. You can just sticking it on enough for him that this fella's screaming, loosen it, grabbing something else, and keep and chewing this fella out. Fight, get out of it, get like.
Oh, no.
And Marty's screaming at him, and Max Crabtree's just. Max had this little thing where he do this little, and he's like as if he's making notes or something. He's just loving watching these fellas
just
getting
smirking
beaten
and
up. He's
watching.
yeah, just watching, sat on a chair right in front of the ring, just watching these fellas get like battered. You know, they're just hammered. He quits. He's like, no more, crying the whole business. He lasted about 6 minutes. It could have been over. It could have, both of them could have been over in less than probably 30 seconds. But Fit stopped, like he wasn't even listening to him when they were tapping out, when they were like, no, submit. He wasn't listening. He was just mollering these fellas, right? So that they've crawled out of this. This ring's in our state, but they've crawled out, and me and Kid McCoy are just like, what the fuck, and stood there and gone. And Fit just turned to Marty and went, all right, Marty, I'll see you later. Because they both had a show against each other that night.
Oh my goodness.
Right? They had a 6-hour drive to go to Great Yarmouth that night, which was a long trip. Right. On a Sunday, it was a Sunday night summer show. He just went, right, I'll see you later, Marty. He went, oh, see you, Fit. And Max Crabtree went, see you, Marty, thanks. So then we get in and carry on. And so that was my first meeting. I've seen him at shows and that. That was my first meeting with Fit.
How about the fact that you've watched this guy on TV and you already knew he was the man, and you saw him in person and he exceeded all expectations?
All
That's
expectations.
insane, right?
Yeah. And he was, you know, I wasn't 6'3" at that time, and I wasn't the size I was. And if you go back and look at him, once he started growing his hair, he started getting thicker, and he was tricked because he was always he was like, that's why he was called Fit Finlay, because he was like a mega fitness fanatic. He's always lean when he was younger, and he always had incredible physique, but he'd started getting heavier because I think he realized you had to be an heavyweight to make a lot of money. So he although he was never really a heavyweight, he got into Germany, and then once he got into Germany, because they always wanted heavyweights, he was the top man there as well. So the next thing is, a couple of months later, back to the same guy again, Tony Francis. Tony Francis's daughter is getting married, and I get invited, and we're in Blackpool, and there's a lot of the wrestlers were there. So I'm like, I don't feel like it's my place. I'm working for a small company. These are all big stars to me. I don't feel it's my place to go over. If it was a dressing room, yes. If it's a wedding, it's the table with all the big wrestling stars. I'm just sort of think like, that, you know, I'm going to go over and say, oh, I'm a wrestler. They're going to look at me and just go, oh, of course you are. But Tony Friend says, oh, come over and meet everybody. So I go over. Now, I didn't know any better because the group of wrestlers I was around did the horrible, and this is one
The
of the
loose
things I learned.
handshake, right? The loose
Right.
handshake.
Because that's a worldwide thing with people who really don't know what they're doing.
And I've heard Arn Anderson describe it as when you shake someone's hand like that, you're kind of letting them know, I'm going to take care of you. You're going to take
Oh,
care of me.
well, I
and that-
learned this at 17, and I've never shook hands like that. So comes to Fit Finlay, he's not really paying attention. I don't think he even remembers me from Marty's gym.
Right.
And I go and give him my hand, and he just crushes my hand. So I learned, and he looked at me like I'd just dropped out of a dog's backside.
You weak
Like,
handshake person, right?
Whatever happened, it was a good 6 months until I actually went and worked for Joint Promotions, and then, which was a great thing for me, and why I'm always indebted to Marty, because they knew that I'd gone through Marty's hard work. I'm not making any excuses for Marty, and sometimes he gets people riled up. But as I said, he didn't have to retrain me. He never charged me a penny. And he can be hard work. But because people knew I'd been through his camp, people accepted me. So by the time I did go to work for Joint Promotions, when I walked in, I didn't get the cold shoulder treatment.
Right.
They knew that I must be a somebody else. There's no way Marty would put his word on me.
It was some level of credibility
Yes.
beyond what anybody else would have if you had trained with Marty Jones.
Yes. So I never wrestled him in that few months that I was, the 3 months that I was in Joint Promotions, because he was always on with Marty Jones, or he was on with Iron Fist, or he was on with whoever he was on with. He wasn't on with me.
It was a different level, like he was a headliner kind of deal.
Well, he was having the good match.
Okay.
I was putting the Big Daddy tags.
That's still
which was
still
the
you're
second,
making it right.
Yeah, he was the second. Like, really, it was Marty and Fit that kept John Promotions going.
Right.
Till the end. It wasn't Big Daddy by then. Big Daddy's, you know, if it was just Big Daddy on a show, there wasn't many people. And if it was Fit against Marty Jones, or Fit against the right opponent, or Marty against the right opponent, they were still doing decent business, good business. Big Daddy was on the shows, and although he had top billing because his brother was the promoter, it was Fit Finlay and Marty Jones.
Getting some measure of undue credit, probably.
Yes. So I'd left, and then February of 97, so I keep saying 90, February of 87, I turn up at a show, Ashton-under-Lyne, which is in Manchester, just outside of Manchester. And there's a theatre there. And I'm still 18. And Fit walks in. And I said, oh, hello. He went, oh, how you doing? You okay? Did you get married? Because I got married on my last match for Joint Promotions when I quit was November the 6th. I got married on November the 8th. So I'd seen him that night on the 6th, and I said, this is my last night. I'm going to work for Brian. He went, oh, good for you. And I said, yeah. He said, oh, good luck with the wedding. Well, he'd remembered that from a few months later when I met him again. He went, oh, did you get married? Oh, he said, actually, I think I'm on with you tonight. And I'm like, and this is me now at 18, and I've grown up a lot, and I've had to put up with a lot. And you couldn't have got a 2-penny nail up my backside when he said I was on with him, because I thought he's gonna like, right, I'm gonna get that, whatever I thought I was gonna get in Marty's, because I'm like, you know.
And you've seen what that man can do.
I've seen it firsthand what he can do.
Right.
I've also seen him on TV do it.
Mhm.
There is a match. I've seen him do it to many people. If he was in certain match, you had to protect your spot. And if he was on with somebody who wasn't of his
On the level,
standard,
you're right, the standard that he thought that he was on.
or he had to, if he was, like the European heavy middleweight or light heavyweight champion or whatever whatever belt him and Marty were fighting over, you had he'd eat people up.
Right.
Because you had to protect you, or you couldn't kill your own credibility.
Right.
Now, I've seen him in my time in John Promotions do this with a couple of people. I've seen him on TV do this. Right? There's a match. You can see this match on TV. It's on YouTube against a fella called Black Prince. There was a guy called Steve Prince who did afterwards he did a different thing. It was the one time that I saw him. I wasn't at the show. I just saw it on TV. And he was a local fella from down south somewhere, and he wore a black karate suit, and so that there was the name they gave him, the Black Prince. Well, basically, it was Marty against Fit Finlay for the championship. But they couldn't wrestle each other all the time. They had to have other opponents. Well, this was just a different opponent for Fit to beat on TV. But there was no short matches on TV. This is 6 rounds. And Fit's got the ump with this fella. And all I say is watch it. It gets uncomfortable if you know what you're watching, because this fella should have just actually just run away. You got to give him credit, because Fit's just like, he's giving him as little as possible, and just like, but being a pro, I've got to get through this match. They need the time. There's another match that matches this with Marty Jones at the same time, that they needed a different opponent, and it's against an Australian fella called Digger Nolan. Now, this fella had obviously just written to Max Crabtree and said, look, I'm a wrestler from Australia. I'm coming. Can you use me? Max would have thought, oh, it's for the world. Marty's the world mid-heavyweight champion. I'll put him on with an Australian.
Right.
This fella's paying his own fare. He's probably only going to he's not going to pay him much. It's just, but it's somebody different, right? Than beating one of his regular crew. Well, this fella walks out, and I've never met this fella, and I hope he doesn't hear this, but when you look at him in that day and age, when wrestlers, especially the style of Marty, and they had to be wrestlers, and he looks like he should be doing the ring, right? But he's got the hat on with the corks, and well, Marty's, again, I know the story from Marty later on. He was supposed to do a 6-round draw with this fella, and then a few weeks later, because this fella was in England for so long, do another match with him, beat him, then move back onto Finlay, move back onto Finlay.
Little program.
Marty is trying his best to get, this fella can't even get in the ring right. You can't even, you just as soon as you can see him,
see it right away.
See it right away.
Right away.
So Marty's trying to give him stuff, and you can, now this is supposed to go 6 rounds. Marty just drop kicks his head off and knocks him spark out with a drop kick. And I mean, right on the button, because Marty could knock you out with a drop kick.
Wow.
He tries, but he doesn't.
And Marty's
for a while,
like, this is my only option right here.
Right. I've got to protect my spot.
Right.
I'm just, I'm going to just knock it. So he just knocks him out. And I mean, knocks him out. So they count him out, which was an unusual thing to see at the time, was like a 1-round match. It was like half a round. You didn't see that in Britain. Well, there was never such thing as enhancement matches and like that. You didn't
Right.
see
No
that. It was
squashes, none of that. Right.
no. It was always
Okay.
minimum of 4 rounds, or if it was a time limit match, there was time limit matches. There was nothing under 12 minutes or 15 minutes. This lasts about 2.5 minutes, and he knocks his spot. Well, this on the opposite side of this is Fit against Black Prince, Steve Prince. Steve Prince should have just run away because Fit just ragbags and shags him for 6 rounds. Just gives him nothing. So there's the kind of thing that went on.
Well, I'll tell
So-
you, Mr. Regal, I'm gonna interrupt you real quick.
What we
Yeah.
got now?
Well, we're talking about
Oh.
Fit Finlay, right? And one way that can help you be a little bit more fit is using one of our sponsors, Athletic Greens.
Oh yes,
And I
like
know
them.
that Mr. Regal likes taking Athletic Greens. I believe you're taking
Yes,
it pretty much daily because you don't really
yes.
like vegetables, right?
Well, it's not that I don't eat them,
Right.
but I do take this product. Yes,
And it does, Athletic Greens, if
it
you're
works.
wanting
It's good.
if you want better gut health, more energy, optimized immune system, don't want to take pills or vitamins, it might be the answer for you. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right, especially if you're starting your day with a bunch of Hindu squats, right, Mr. Regal?
Yes,
It certainly helps.
did mine this morning. Yes.
And this special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Um, so, Mr. Regal, you talked about maybe you were taking on the road, like
Yes,
when you're
I
going on the
take
road,
it on the road with me. Yes,
and it's
and it's easy because you get little packets and just tip in the water and mix it up. They
it
actually provide a shake. They sent me a shaker, so there's a little thing you can just put it in, shake it up, drink it.
and they make
Yeah.
it really easy. How would you describe the taste of it? Is it
It's a very it's not what you expect. A lot of green drinks taste not pleasant. This is a very it has in my opinion. I hope I'm not offending the makers of this wonderful product, but has a fruity taste to it. It's very very nice.
so it's got that fresh taste you like from fresh
Yeah.
vegetables, and it's lifestyle friendly whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, or gluten free. It costs
Mm.
less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, man. The stuff we spend money on, that one of the most important things that we forget about is spending money on your health, and it's
All
cheap.
you've got is your health. Let me tell you, if you've heard enough stories about me, there's been a lot going on lately. The only thing that matters in your life is looking after your health, right? Because it can go very quickly.
Absolutely, and something that's important to me as well is they're very about they have very much about values and sustainability. For every purchase, they we Athletic Greens donates to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the US. In 2020, Athletic Greens donated over 1.2 million meals to kids. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/regal. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/regal to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And you were probably thinking that your ultimate daily insurance was about to run out because you just found out that today, the day we're talking about, is the day that you're going to meet Mr. Fit Finlay in the ring.
Right. So Ashton on the Line, February 1987. In a theatre, Matt, it's your job to keep me on track. A couple of years ago, I don't watch much TV unless it's English TV. But I was in wherever I was, and there was a British TV show on about the most haunted places in Britain. And it was in this theatre in Ashton-under-Lyne. And all I can say is what a complete load of old cobblers a load of old nonsense that show was, because I've wrestled in that theatre loads of times and never once felt, and that, the fella, like one of those moody psychics,
Right.
like he walked in and went, "Oh, I can feel the spirits," and I'm thinking, you tosspot, you can't feel nothing. What a load of old crap. So anyway, an absolute non. Anyway, it was a full show about this theatre.
Right. It's all
And it was,
bullshit.
I wrestled there loads of times. Me and Robbie have talked, me and Brookside have talked about this. Absolute load of old bollocks. Nonsense. People will stand for anything. Anyway, so I get in the ring with Fit Finlay and I think, right, well, here we go. But now I am from a different time. And we've talked about last week's episode or the episode that we did about, well, many of the episodes about me having a certain style and
Sure.
and believing in keeping the strength of the job.
And to have no holes in your style.
No holes. And
right.
I don't believe in playing it.
And that's
being a pro wrestler.
Something very
right?
important to you. It's
very important.
It's real when you're in
Yes. From the bell ringing till the end of the 6th round when he beat me, it was just as he made me. I wasn't anywhere near the wrestler I became years later. He made me look 1,000 times better than I ever could, but there was chemistry there and it never stopped. And so we became regular opponents, which we'll get into in a little bit, or maybe a separate episode.
Do you have any specific recollections about talking to him after the match or pre the match or anything like that?
There was none of that went on.
Okay.
People don't believe, it's like hard to explain. You just go out there and you just do your thing. Right. And we would all train differently, and we were trained to go out and react and listen to the crowd or react or just wrestle, or and I found that with people from the 80s, any of the people that were trained before the 80s, it was the same. When I wrestled all the luchadors in WCW, they were all trained in that way. Then I didn't matter they hadn't been to Mexico. I could wrestle. I wrestled all of those fellas. There was a universal language of wrestling. We all understood the body mechanics, and so we could all wrestle each other. Right. Occasionally you would have somebody you didn't quite have the greatest of chemistry with. Here's a story about Fit Finlay. I'm not going to mention the person's name, but he was somebody. This was the kind of thing that Fit had. I was on one of these shows, the second one. I wasn't on the first one. This fella, I won't mention his name, but he did come to America for a while. He came with Chris Adams. He was a friend of Chris Adams. And they were from the same area. And he was I believe he was in LA because Chris Adams started off in LA and then he might have gone to Texas with him, but for some reason he came back to Britain.
Chris Adams was from Stratford-on-Avon, I believe.
Yes.
Right.
And this fellow was from that area, or in fact, it was Leamington Spa, I believe, which is right next door. It's a lovely, lovely place, Leamington Spa. And he was a judo guy like Chris Adams and a fit fella. He had wrestled on the show that I wasn't on. He had 2 matches back to back with Fit. He was on the night before with Fit, and this fella was an handful, right? He was a good judo guy, and he was an handful and a fit-looking fella. Whatever happened, I don't know the exact story. You'd have to ask Fit, but this fella, Fit got the with this fella. took a disliking to it. So I'm on the show in Leamington Spa, which is this fella's hometown. Again, I'm not going to mention his name. This fella's hometown. Now, usually, you know, I'm not an ego merchant when it comes to whatever with this job. I know all that, you know, I'm open about what I am. I don't think I'm anything, right? But a lot of wrestlers are. And if you're on in your hometown, you know,
You're probably going to look good.
right. You want to, right? At
Right.
least.
You want to.
Whatever Fit did to him the night before and dragged him about and as we used to say, from arsehole to breakfast time. Yeah. He didn't turn up and was never seen again
Oh, no.
in his hometown. So this is the kind of thing at Fit Finlay, which is going to lead me on to this other story. So Brian Dixon, who ran All Star Promotions, every year, I don't know when it ended, but when I was working for him in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was in Britain, I wasn't in Britain much from 88 through 92. I'd only be in Britain a few months of the year, then I'd be off on my travels because we've talked about that, where I was fortunate enough to get taken in by a Terry Rodge and Pete Robertson, Dave Taylor and people, and they put me into different countries and Dalabar Singh and people that were always very good to me. Brian Dixon every year had this show in a place called Linlithgow in Scotland. And it was in a marquee, a big posh tent. And it was a Rotary Club, dude. Do you have the Rotary Club in America?
We do.
And it's for businessmen. And
absolutely.
Is that the same
thing we have here? I have one in my town.
Okay. So it was a Rotary Club, dude. Now, it's all men. And it's in Scotland, so they're all dressed up in their attire, which is the kilts and the sporrans, the things they wear around the waist, and the nice jackets and the lovely frilly shirts, and it's a lovely. They have a lovely way of dressing when they have to dress up, the Scots. And I have a lot of Scottish friends. Unlike a lot of English people, I get on with all the other. I've never. There's a lot of English people are little-minded and don't seem to get on with the Scots and the Welsh and the Irish. I've always got on with everybody. So, but they're all dressed like that. They have no interest in watching wrestling. Let's just say that. They want to see, there's no polite way of saying this, but they want to probably have a couple of strippers and a what we call a blue comic.
It's a different crowd.
A comic who tells filthy jokes, right? I mean, that's what they want to say.
Right.
They certainly don't want wrestling on. But Brian Dixon had this show every year. It was a regular show. Myself and Robbie Brookside had gone on early. There was the first match that went on. None of these fellas were paying the slightest bit of attention. They're all sat round tables, playing cards, most of them, drinking whiskey, smoking cigars, couldn't care less about the wrestling. In this huge tent, no interest whatsoever, right? The first match went on, complete and utter, just nothing, silence. Me and Robbie went on. Myself and Robbie Brookside, when we wrestled each other, we prided ourselves on being able to turn non-wrestling fans into fans. We could wrestle we got to the point, and that was mostly because of him guiding me.
What a great mindset that is to get into, right? Like, if you're going to do that, you said episode 1, what can I take from this, right? And so you're in a situation where another wrestler might look at this crowd and say, well, damn, this is a no-win situation. But you guys are looking at it like, Let's turn these
We
people into fans.
well, Brian Dixon had a saying, and it stuck with us, and it'd go, just let's make them have it, which meant even if you had an hard crowd, your job is to make them have it. Whether they want it or not, you've got to get an emotional response out of these. You know, some people just didn't have the skill set or willing to go to whatever extra, you know, because sometimes it meant me and Robbie going at it hard, or whoever, right? So we went on. By the middle of round 2, these fellas were not only watching us, the money and that, when I'm talking stacks of piles of money, they were betting on who was going to win. And this was a 6-round match. They were betting each other, throwing money on the table.
Like a dog
betting,
fight.
Right. Because we just knew how to do that. We'd had a lot of experience. We used to get these tours of the British and American army bases in Europe. They've got no interest in watching wrestling. They just, we did one once in a show in Germany. Sorry, in Britain. I did some of the German army bases, American and British army bases. We did one in Britain once, and one of the people in charge of the entertainment, they come over to me and Rowan. That was great, lads. He said, usually we get all kinds of acts, you know, because these people who are kind enough and brave enough to protect our countries are on these bases, army or air force, marine bases or whatever. Well, you know, they get all kinds of they get everything as far as entertainment. And this fellow was explaining to us, it doesn't matter who they send, it could be the best act in the world. We don't even give them chance. It's like sport to us. It's like sport.
Right.
And he used a word, and I had a phrase here, we just can them off. And I went, what's that? He said, well, you know, we drink beer cans, and we just, don't matter what they do, and we just start throwing cans at them.
Can them
Right.
off the stage.
Can them off.
Right.
Off the stage. Yeah. Just can them off.
Right.
So I'm like, he said, you not only there was not one can thrown, you had them all betting and going mad for these matches we did. So me and him, but we would go at it, right? And we you know, there's so many hundreds of matches that we had that are all lost, with the exception of 2. And I think I've told this story. One of them isn't. One's in a gym, in the power plant in Atlanta, and the other one is not the best of anywhere. Probably the worst match we ever had, and that was down to me, because I ended up eating 2 meals because I stopped at families, and I was too polite to turn them down, and I was stuffed. So it's not, although it's not bad, it's nothing like the kind of matches we made a names for ourselves. And again, that was mostly down to Robbie being 2 years older than me and being patient with me, and teaching me and all this stuff that all these other people had taught me. But he helped me form it all, right? And that's why we're so close friends. So we've gone on, and we've had these people, we've got them up in an uproar. But now the following match has gone on, and they've gone back to playing cards. But there's another 4 matches on. Well, Fit, I forget who Fit was on with, but Fit, he stood I'm near the back of the tent. The ring's about 50 feet away. There's a bar there. They're just going up and getting more bottles of whiskey and pints of beer and playing cards and completely ignoring the rest. This fella in his kilt and his lovely velvet black jacket and the white frilly shirt, and he's a little inebriated, to put it mildly. He comes over and he said, that was wonderful. That match you had with that fella, he said, brilliant. He went, can't wait for I apologize for swearing on this. And he just pointed over at Fit, thinking that Fit could near him. Fit hasn't gone on yet. Fit, I know, because that night he knew how to get a crowd. He got the same response as we got, but in a villain way. We got it because of we're doing a competitive wrestling match. He got him because of his wrestling skills and incredible match, but got him wanting to kill him, if that makes any sense. We had a competitive match. He just knew how to get a crowd interested in what he was doing. And he's just watching from the back and seeing that's what a good pro do. We talked about that with John Cena, I think, the other week, how we always watch a match.
Sure.
Well, if you're on last, a good pro will be watching everything, so he knows what he's got to follow, right? Which is a little tip for everybody. You should know or if you've seen them do something that you might have had in your head, don't do it.
There's a million reasons to watch the whole thing.
Million reasons to watch, but Fit's behind like that. And this fella is going, that was great. That was unbelievable. Really good. He said, you two are tearing your heads up, each other's heads off. And he went, can't wait for that Irish bastard, he said, to get on here. He said, we're going to throw bottles and all kinds at him. Not thinking Fit can hear him.
Right.
Fit's come walking over. He went, all right, fella. And the fella's gone, oh, hello, Mr. Finlay. How are you doing? Like completely switched it. Now, this is Fit's side of the version, or Fit's version of it when he told me, because I was right there.
Right.
This fella, I think, has put his hand out to shake Fit's hand. Fit is used to having people attacking him.
Mm-hmm.
This hand has come out. Fit Finlay, as this fella's hands come out, Fit Finlay, there's a trick. I'm not going to show you how to do it, but I know how to do it. As this fella's hands come out, Fit Finlay's just gone and snapped this fella's thumb off.
With 2 fingers. Breaks his thumb.
With 2 fingers, with a finger and a thumb, just gone. This fella's thumb has dislocated and it's just hanging. So his thumb is just hanging in the socket. And Fitz just walked away. Now, this fella is he's a little bit drunk, to put it mildly, but he's in complete shock. Because if you have ever done anything to your thumb, it's you don't know what to do. It's just, now I'm just stood there, just watching. This fella's thumb is just swinging in his palm. It's hanging out the joint. But his body's gone into shock. He's not screaming. He's just in shock. And he's going, he's broke my thumb. He's broke my thumb. And he must have been a farmer, this fella, because there were a lot of rich farmers at the time.
Right.
He went, I've got to get up at 6 o'clock to milk the cows. He's broke my thumb. He's broke my thumb. He just can't stop saying it.
Right. He's
the
in
thumb's hanging
absolute
up.
shock.
He's in absolute shock. So I've just patted him on the back and walked away and just started pissing myself laughing. I didn't know what else to do. Just left it there. But that's one of the few things that I can keep going on and on about with Fit Finlay. He's not a man to be messed with.
Well,
let's put it that way.
And he comes by it honestly, because I believe I heard a story from Fit once on a video talking about his dad doing the same thing to somebody. Then that sounds really uncomfortable. And if you want to be comfortable, science tells us that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering core body temperature. Temperature controlled sleep repairs the muscles after a hard day's work and improves cognitive function, so you can always start your day feeling sharp and alert. And I believe one of the best parts about for Mr. Regal of starting this podcast is he has been exposed to, and he has been experienced ChiliSleep. And Mr. Regal, you love your ChiliSleep.
I do. I absolutely love it. I have no idea about using phones and stuff, but it's on my phone and my wife showed me how to use it. I'm set at 66 degrees and it's lovely and cool. And I get in and I don't toss and turn.
And for someone
occasional toss, but not too many turns. And then don't laugh. You'll get us stuck off the air. So I love it, and it just keeps everything lovely and cool. It's and definitely helps.
Well,
works.
And especially for someone like you or someone like me who always has trouble sleeping, It makes customizable, climate controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well being. They make the Uller and Cube sleep systems, which are hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide your ideal sleep temperature. And these luxury pads keep your bed at the perfect temperature for deep sleep, whether you sleep hot or you sleep at 66 degrees like Mr. Regal. These sleep systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. Imagine waking up and not feeling tired. ChiliSleep can help make that happen. And for an extra layer of comfort, they also make the Chili Blanket, the only weighted blanket that can also be paired with a control unit for the ultimate sweat-free sleep. Head over to chilisleep.com/regal to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Gentleman Villain with William Regal listeners and only for limited time. That's Chili, CHILI, sleep.com/regal to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. So now, Mr. Regal, we are going to take just a couple
Yes,
questions from Twitter about Fit Finlay. Are you ready, sir?
I certainly am.
Now, one question we had on Twitter, which is also a question I had, I got to interview this young man a couple years ago, and to watch him develop into this really, really, really good wrestler. The question from Twitter is, how much of Fit Finlay do you see in his son, David Finlay?
Oh, a lot. I don't think we've even seen the
What he's going to
how
do,
can I
right?
put this? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's good, man.
It's just not. It's so good, and he's. I mean, we saw him on AEW the other week. He's just in there's things that he does that I see that he's in a different league as far as a lot of people, as far as the little in between things, stuff that you won't notice or people won't notice or shouldn't notice really. But he just does things incredibly well, and it's a strange thing when I see him because I used to babysit him. And my wife did, and he's a lovely lad. And it is just it, when he gets to finally be let loose, which he will do one day, because it's undeniable how good he is. When he gets let loose, everybody's in for a treat because he's a
I,
special lad.
I totally agree with my lack of expertise compared to yours, but as a fan, I'm a big, big fan of David Finlay. Um,
Yes.
this is a question from Patrick Taylor on Twitter, and that is,
Hello, Patrick.
yes, Patrick, thank you for writing us. And this could be your favorite, but he's asking, what is the best match you ever saw Fit compete in?
Ooh, right. I do know that. So I've seen so many. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Right. The best match that I ever saw was in 1991 in Warrington. I believe it was 91. Could be a year or so either side. And it was in Warrington, England, and it was against the Par Hall is the name of the building, and it was against Kung Fu Eddie Hamill, who is the man that helped train him, and who, along with Fit Finlay's dad, sort of created the Irish wrestling scene. And it was an unusual night. It was always a great building, but in the balcony, we just talked about before about when you have wrestling fans or fans there that aren't particularly there for the wrestling. In the balcony, for some unknown reason, there was a lot of college students. I don't know that, and this was a regular place we did, so that they stood out. Why are they there? They're not. That's not usually, and they're you get to know the crowds because you see them every month or every 2 weeks or whatever it was, every month in those days, I think. There's a lot of young people sat in the balcony, and then they're not fans. So I don't know what possessed them to come to wrestling. And everybody that was going on, they were heckling them and not just, I don't know, just to be annoying. It seemed when I was watching, because I hadn't gone on yet. And Fit went on there with Eddie Fu, Eddie Hamill, and by the 3/4 away through the first round, they had him. And they had these people who thought they were too smart to be wrestling fans. And again, in a different day and age, before there was, especially in England, there was no sort of internet or insider stuff going on. Had these fans going insane. They just knew exactly how to manipulate them, to make them have the full wrestling experience, and they're cheering and booing exactly at the right time, and captured the imagination, and it was fantastic. Is one to add to the list. There's a real great match to watch. Fit Finlay and Rocky Moran, who as Rocky was trained by Fit's dad, and I believe, I'm not sure about Eddie Hamill, but definitely Fit's dad, against Kung Fu, Eddie Hamill, and Iron Fist, Clive Myers. And it's a fantastic tag match. It's on YouTube. It comes round to the end of the match, and Fit and Rocky feed Kung Fu one of my favorite ever comebacks of all time. They obviously respect him a lot. He's held in high esteem by them, and they make sure that they make him look like the greatest babyface of all time with this comeback.
Right.
So that's another one that's worth watching if you want to watch how good Fit. Well, if anybody in that match, because there's a lot of people don't know this, especially like Rocky Moran was really good, and Eddie Hamill. Iron Fist is somebody that a lot of the late 1999 and early 2000 tape traders know, because there's a match of him and Steve Gray that was highly influential with a lot of young American wrestlers. But there's not too many people know about Kung Fu, and at this particular time he was in his 40s, maybe late 40s, and he was just brilliant. But they make sure that they feed him for this comeback, and it's fantastic. But the match in Warrington, again, lost a history on it because not a lot was filmed in those days. But Kung Fu against Fit Finlay at the Par Hall in Warrington. I've seen many matches with Finlay and Dave Taylor, just fantastic together. They were chasing each other for the British Heavyweight Championship at the beginning of 1992, and that was the last 2 months that I wrestled in England. March the 1st, I went away to India, and then I was in different parts of the world all the way through until Christmas, and then I came to America after that. But those two, every match was incredible. And I was on a lot of them, the shows. We were working. Business was TV business went down a little bit after TV stopped in '88. In 1990, the end of 91 and 92, it was booming for all-star promotions. It was absolutely booming. And a lot of that was down to Fit Finlay and Dave Taylor chasing each other for the British Heavyweight Championship. And it just all posters and word of mouth, no TV. And people were coming, and they had fantastic matches. There's too many. There's just so many. I mean,
Well,
people that there's, you know, everybody. If you'd have been around, you saw whatever you saw of Fit Finlay, you saw from the mid-90s. If you would have seen, well, getting into the later 90s, because he was here for a short 3 months in 1996 when I did the stuff with him in WCW, which um, a lot of people at the time couldn't care less about an Englishman and an Irishman beating the life out of each other, but that's seemed to have stood the test of time. People still talk about that stuff. But then he came back in 97 and you know, he had certain times that he was on with the right people and, you know, and then he had an incredible WWE run. But if you'd have seen him in the 80s, and I did all the time, there wasn't even if it wasn't a great opponent, there wasn't a bad match. He was the best. He was the absolute best. Terry Funk's gone on record of saying he was the best he'd ever seen.
well, this has
I mean,
been. I'm sorry. Was there something else you want to say? I didn't mean to cut you.
no, I mean, he was so good and so credible and just a heat getting machine and just knew exactly what to do and proved it. You know, he was in his 50s when he was doing stuff in WWE and
Mm-hmm.
made people believe that, you know, he had a different style and only had one leg at that time as well, because he had the accident in WCW. That's another thing. I mean, you know, it's not something he's not giving away a secret here. He had an accident in WCW where it severed through his, it looks like he's got a shark bite on his calf. So anything you saw of him in WWE, from the knee down, he has no feel in his leg. His leg is completely dead.
Wow.
and dropped. And he still did those incredible matches and the Rey Mysterio stuff. And whoever he wrestled in WWE, he's doing that on one leg.
Wow. Well, that is something.
And he's training people still today. And me and him last year in the PC, just that there was a group of people there and a lot of the top names that have either still with WWE or moved on to AEW were around the ring or stood on the apron. And me and him got in the ring and just wrestled each other. And they were all just stood with their mouths open.
Wow, that must
And
have been something.
That's like 60, he's 60, whatever, and I'm 54. I was 54. So, well, I was 53 then. And I've gone, we had, you know, chemistry. A lot of matches I saw him have with Marty, incredible. You can see a lot of that's on YouTube. A lot of matches with Danny Boy Collins. They were perfect opponents. If you want to watch some of the stuff from the 80s, he was just the best. And we both say that, you've heard me say this over and over on this show because I mentioned him so much because he was such an influence on me, but Terry Rudge, both me and Fit, people seem to think we're whatever we are, and I think Fit's the best. We both say that Terry Rudge is the best wrestler we ever wrestled. And then the next down the list will be Pete Roberts. So we've both been very fortunate to wrestle incredible wrestlers, but all around everything. Now, all around everything, Eddie Guerrero rates up there with me as the best because of the once he figured the entertaining stuff out. But Fit Finlay, as far as the actual wrestling wise and believability wise, Fit Finlay was the best.
Well, we are going to talk about Fit Finlay again. This is just the very beginning, and
Yep.
we haven't got to too much about it. But I do want to say this has been another educational, entertaining experience with you, Mr. Regal. Love to thank
you.
Mr. Steve Kaufman for all of his help with the video and everything else. Of course, Wesley Burleson does the production audio wise. Our research guys, Derek Sabato, Richard Lamb, thank you for all your help. And Dave Green, Conrad, everybody else involved with podcast Heat. And this has been yet another episode, please tune in next week to Gentleman Villain with William Regal.